So let me give you just a real quick description of what happened because I didn't want to break character, right? So in the middle of the class, we've done everything we can to save money here and there. You know, we moved in August to this old building which has been made into our new headquarters, and we had we had a professional electrician supposedly who did all the work. But one of the problems that showed up this past couple of weeks, it doesn't get horribly cold in the South, but it's pretty cold for us. We're not used to it. So whenever we started running heaters, we experienced some tripping of breakers. So what you saw today was we were just trying to keep the main man who's running everything warm. I ran a heater, a space heater over by Seth so that, you know, he wouldn't freeze. I'm wearing a sweater, but it's cold in this building. So anyway, you know, me being the great sacrificer that I am, I figured I'd let Seth have the heater. And so, but it ultimately it tripped the breaker, which was tied obviously to another outlet. Long story short, this week now has become contact an electrician and sort through all that. But we're not here to talk about that. I just wanted to explain what happened. Good thing that most of you, I think, stuck it out through that and everything worked out fine. So here we are. We're talking about not electrical problems. We're talking about Jacob's dream and the story of Bethel. And I've got several people with their hands up. So let's see what some of you have as far as insights for us. Damon, how are you, brother? Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. I think we might have some Masiba problems here. So,
Hang on just a second.
okay.
Try me now.
Test.
Nope. Hold on. Hmm? Damon?
Yes.
Mm-mm.
Not hearing?
1 second. I'm trying to get something sorted here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try that.
Okay.
All right, Damon. Let me see if I can hear you now.
Testing. Can you hear me?
I got you, man. I got you. Sorry. I'm ready.
Great. No problem.
I'm ready. We're
No
ready
problem.
now. Okay, let's start all this over. Welcome.
Okay. So I was going to say we had some Masiba problems in the text, but you might have some reception problems too. Anyway, so you brought out a good point that later the text condemns raising up a pillar, a sacred pillar, but here Jacob's doing exactly that. So what's going on? One of the things I wanted to bring out was the kind of the cultural background of what raising up a pillar meant to the surrounding peoples, because obviously they were using it for worship purposes, but exactly what did it mean? Well, what it meant was not only a land claim, which that's what Jacob was doing, he was taking possession of the land of Canaan, but also the worship of the god of the land. Okay. So that pillar basically represented the person's descendants, because it's in the shape of an erect you know what. But it also represented the person's ancestors. So it was a form of ancestor worship, them worshiping their ancestors as gods. Later on in the same Torah portion, we actually see another aspect of that when Rachel steals Laban's household gods. They're called teraphim. And those are, again, the household ancestors that are being worshipped as gods, except they're conveniently portable. Jacob's pillar was semi-portable. It weighed about, what was it, like 200-300 pounds? So you could carry it around if you had several people. But
what are you talking about? Weighed several hundred pounds. What are you talking about?
Jacob's pillar stone.
And how would you know that? I'm just curious.
The pillar stone that we have today in Edinburgh Castle is Jacob's pillar stone. So that's what they used to carry around on great iron rings, which they put a carrying pole through so that people could carry it.
All right.
So
that's clearly, by the way, I would just to add, that's clearly legendary. Whether it's actually, what's that?
Why is that?
You're saying that Edinburgh Castle has the actual stone that Jacob set up at Bethel?
Yes.
How in the world would we know that? Just bear with me. I'm just asking the question. I'm familiar with a lot of the, like the stone of scone and the various ideas associated with, so that's, but to say that is the stone, I would attribute that to a legend, and a legend that cannot be, this is just my view, that cannot be confirmed, right?
What I would say is there's circumstantial evidence. There's significant circumstantial evidence, but you're right, there's not direct proof.
Okay.
I didn't want to get into that so much as saying, okay, you've got, on the one hand, a pillar stone that's meant to serve as a land claim, which is raised up to represent that person's descendants. On the other hand, you've got the portable version, which is the household gods of Laban. Okay. And what Rachel was doing by stealing those is basically saying that the blessing of these gods is now going to go with my family as opposed to Laban's family. They're supposed to go to the firstborn, because that's the head of the household. But what Rachel did by stealing them is saying that the blessing associated with them is now going to be given to me. Okay, so there's a reflection of the same symbolism that Jacob was doing by stealing his brother Esau's birthright in that later passage. It's just that the text doesn't explain that that's what's going on. Okay, so
Okay.
I wanted to bring that out a little bit. The second thing I wanted to comment on was this idea of the raised whatever it was um, that Jacob saw
The
in his dream.
Yeah, the ladder, the sulam, the stairway, the staircase.
Yes. So we have there a term which, as you said, it's not necessarily easy to interpret what it was.
Yeah.
But what I think is that later texts call that a high place. And what it basically was literally a place that was high up where, as it were, you could connect with God, whatever God of the land that you were worshiping. So, what later biblical kings did was they broke down the pagan high places where gods were worshipped, pagan gods were worshipped. What Jacob saw in his dream was God's high place and set up God's pillar stone because it's called the house of God. And the reason why later texts say, okay, well, don't set up a pillar stone was because it's basically saying, we don't want you to worship your ancestors. That's not the point. Um, what Jacob was doing was establishing a land claim, but basically don't worship your ancestors to do that. Worship God. Um, Another interesting thing that comes out of that is that that pillar stone, it's called the house of God. It wasn't a building. It was a family household. Okay. So by calling that pillar stone the house of God, what um, Jacob's basically saying is, okay, my family is set apart by God. This has become God's family household through which he's going to bring forth his plan. We see later texts like in Ephesians talk about, it says the whole family on heaven and in earth is named basically after God.
So you're doing just as a common comment.
Mhm.
You are a lot of this is these are your interpretations, and just to make it
Mhm.
clear, um,
Mhm.
the text. What I try to do is, as I said, the exegesis versus eisegesis. So
Mhm.
what we do know is that the matzevah is a consistent term. It's not to be confused with teraphim. It's not to be confused with these
Yes.
other things. So I just don't want people to be confused by what you said. So we have different items and we have different reasons for these items. And the matzevah was something very specific, and it had to
Yes.
do with as the story describes it, we don't get a lot from the text on this other than it's just a standing stone. He stands a stone up, he pours oil on it, and
Mhm.
some of these other ideas have more of an interpretive, I guess you could say. I just wanted to, because the text we don't get a lot. We just know
Correct.
that the matzevah is later condemned by the biblical writers and ultimately destroyed. So, but
Right.
anyway,
The reason I'm bringing this out is because this is cultural background that we get from extra biblical sources that shed light on what we're seeing here in the Bible. Correct. The text doesn't go on and explain this.
hmm
In order to understand it, you have to look at extra biblical sources to see what they say about, okay, why did they raise up stones? Why
yeah,
did they raise up pillars?
yeah.
And understand, okay, well, that's what they were doing. And now that sheds additional light on what the biblical text is telling us.
All right, all right. Okay, I appreciate you, Damon. Let me bring Karen up. We seem to be functioning pretty well now that all the technology, and part of that was me, by the way, but I don't want to take too much blame, but it was. Anyway, Seth bailed me out. And Karen, how are you? Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. How are you?
Good. So I have a different idea on these standing stones. Um, you can, if you look at the West, even Europe and Mesopotamia, almost everywhere in the world, including the Americas, there is a certain thing that ancient man would do in order to indicate a sacred space.
Okay.
And he would build a henge.
A hinge.
Henge, like Stonehenge.
Okay. All
You can
right.
find them all over. And these are kind of nondescript places, but they are specifically to commemorate a sacred space. And when, usually it's a set of, a circle of stones with an altar in the middle. And, when we think Stonehenge, we're like, oh, that's huge. Well, most henges are not that big. A lot of them are only, the stones are 3 feet high and, not real wide, maybe 1.5 feet wide. So, I mean, I could easily see Jacob setting up a small circle to commemorate this place as a sacred place.
Yeah.
As a place where, he heard from God. And, even, Stonehenge, even people will go there and be like, oh, the energy, or there's something special about this place,
Yeah.
or, whether there is or not, that monolith is going to play tricks on your brain and make you think it is. So I can, when Joshua tells the people to grab 12 stones and set up a mesabah,
Yeah.
Saba,
Mm-hmm.
how do we know they're just making a pile? Are they putting them in a circle to commemorate a sacred space?
Yeah. And we get that same idea almost like you describe in Exodus 24. I mentioned in the class, you have, set up these 12 stones and, they're representative around the altar. And so it is, and we see those in the ancient world. We see them, like I remember when we traveled to, we've taken a couple of trips to Har Karkom, and you find these matzevot set up, and we see even at Biblical Tamar, where I go in the desert, some of you have been there, there are also these standing stones. One is believed to be an ancient Edomite site that, according to the archaeologists, there was major destruction dated to about the 7th century BCE, the time where Josiah is said to go about the countryside destroying these sites. So we found a bunch of, archaeologists found a bunch of smashed incense burners and so forth. So, yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, and I can see God having a problem with that.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, he can he can reach you wherever you are. You don't have to go to a sacred site.
Yeah.
You don't have to, every site is sacred, or no sites are sacred, if you will. But so that was just an idea I had, because you see those all over, and they are to indicate a sacred space, and
Yep.
And they're not necessarily venerated to a god, and most of the time they're unhewn stones.
Right.
And I think that there's some kind of veneration of unhewn stones even mentioned in the biblical text. So
good stuff though. Yeah, and when we're on the trip, if everything works out and we take the trip, we'll see a couple of different examples of this, both out in the field, as we say, and also in the Israel Museum. There are a couple of these examples, like photographs of certain places, but particularly if one of the places that Jonah and I have planned is not to stay there, but to go through Biblical Tamar and to look at the archaeology there and bring the people out and check that out. So you'll see some of these, that have been set back up, quite interestingly.
yeah. And the part about the dreams, dreams can change your life.
Yeah.
An example of that, a dream changed my life and brought me to United Israel. So, but I'm not going to venerate the place that I was when I had the dream.
Right.
Not going to make those things that were around me an idol, if you will, or set that spot up as a sacred space.
Well, I, for one, am glad that you had that dream. I don't know about any other dreams, but the dream that brought you in with us, that's my favorite dream that I've heard of. I like
Yeah.
that. James
Did I
likes it.
ever tell you? Did I ever tell you that dream?
I don't. Are you going to tell it to us now? Because I might have heard a bit of this, but maybe others didn't.
I don't know. Maybe I tell you. It's not. It's not like it's personal, but it's not
Yeah.
like super weird or anything. Well, remember first I had uh, my sister read a book called The Great Physician's Guide to Health and Wellness.
Okay.
And it's all about eating organic, kosher, and da 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 da. And she really wanted us to do it. So I'm like, oh, and I didn't want to do it. And she's like, well, let's do a Daniel fast to start it. And I'll bring all your, she only lived like 5 miles away from me at the time. She's like, I'm going to cook all your food for you and I'll bring it to you. And I'm like, oh, if you're going to go through all that trouble, all right, I guess. So we did this fast for about 10 days and it was horrible. Your brain detoxing from all the chemicals and everything.
Right.
But like in a way, I was like, preparing myself for something that I didn't realize I was doing. And then after that, we decided, okay, we're going to eat kosher from now on. We're going to do this and, we're not going back. This is for keeps. And we're like, okay. And then, so about 2 weeks after I have this, it's almost like a memory. You ever have a dream where you can smell and taste things? And that's kind of how this was. So
Very
I'm
vivid.
very vivid. I'm in a church, like a church lobby, and it's very damp. Like I can feel the damp air on my skin.
Mm.
And I'm there with my 4 kids, and it's like a hostel almost. You can only stay there 2 weeks, and 2 weeks is up, and I have to leave. And so I'm standing there with my 4 children, and I don't have any money to my name, and I don't know where to go. So I think to myself, I have my purse with me. I think to myself, well, I'm going to dig around in this purse and see if I can find enough change to get a cab to drop me off just somewhere. I don't even know where because we can't stay here. And there's a woman at the reception desk, and she's looking kind of cranky, like you need to go. And the door to the place is glass, like a glass door. So I'm digging around in my purse, and I don't find any change, but I do find a key fob, an electronic key fob. So I'm like, what is this? I don't have a car. And I point the key fob out the door, and I can see a line of cars on the street in front of me. So I point the key fob at the door, and one of them lights up and chirps when I hit the unlock button. I'm like, what in the world? And I'm just kind of stunned in the dream. I don't know what's going on. And so I go out the door, and I stand in front of the car, and it's a silver BMW, by the way, a 4-door. And so I stand in front of it, and I click the thing again, and it chirps and lights up. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? So I open the car door, and I sit down in the car, and the car smells like me. And I'm like, I'm still stunned. I don't know what's going on. And I open the glove box, and in the glove box is some mail, and it's in a registration. It's got my name on it, and my lip gloss is in the glove box. And I'm like, what? How could I have forgotten that I had a car? How could I, and that's my mindset is like, I've forgotten this somehow. And memories start coming back into my head like, oh, this is my car. Well, why, why? And I'm berating myself for forgetting that I had a car. And then about that time, a tow truck pulls up next to the car. And she knocks on the window, and I get out, and she has a clipboard. She says, I need you to sign this. And I'm like, what am I signing? I don't even know. She says, well, you didn't make the payment, so we have to tow it.
Mm-mm.
And I'm just like, what do you mean I didn't make the payment? I didn't even know I had a car. What's the payment? And the payment was like 300 and something. I'm like, well, I have no monies in my purse. So how in the world would I have been able to make the payment if I even knew I had the car and I didn't know I had the car? And I'm just, as the car is being towed away, I'm yelling, I didn't know it was mine. I didn't know it was mine. And about at that time, there's a voice that calls my name and says, Karen, you have the key. You've always had it.
Mm.
And then I woke up just like immediately, and I was like hyperventilating. I was pacing the halls. I wanted to call my sister at 4 o'clock in the morning and tell her, "You're not going to believe what happened." But I didn't. I was good. And yeah, it just at that point I knew something wasn't right.
Yeah.
So I gave myself permission to figure out what it was that I was doing wrong.
Did
And
you?
that just led me from one door to another door to another door to until I finally, oh, I should keep the Sabbath. Oh, I should,
Yeah.
do all this.
Once you
And
figured you had the key and you started openly searching, did you then find us like on the internet? Is that what
yeah,
happened?
yeah,
Okay.
it started with, first me just going online and listening to everything.
Yeah.
And I think what happened was like, oh, I used to listen to Sid Roth. You remember Sid Roth?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It was about the time when those blood moons were real popular.
I got you.
And they had this messianic rabbi come on named Mark Biltz, and he's the pastor rabbi, whatever you want to call him, of El Shaddai Ministries
Mm-hmm.
in Washington. And I'm like, oh, I really, liked his teaching style. And so I went on and then started listening to, just binge listen. And I had a job where I could listen to my headphones.
That's good.
So I would listen 8 hours a day to podcasts. And so I listened to all his stuff and then would follow. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to move to Washington. We're going to figure this out. But then he had a guy on there called Nehemiah Gordon.
Yeah.
And then I like this guy. And then so I started watching his stuff on Michael Rood's channel, like Shabbat Night Live or something like that. He had this program like what's in the garbage box at the Vatican thing. And I was just fascinated by that. And so I went and listened to all of the original Torah Pearls with Nehemiah and Keith. And then when I was done listening to all of that, I found another Torah Pearls on Jono's channel with Rabbi Singer.
Yep.
And then I listened to all of Rabbi Singer's Let's Get Biblical. And, by the time I got to the end of that, Rabbi Singer had got me.
Got you.
It was like, oh dear.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are.
Isn't it amazing though when you think about it? I mean, all of these stories, James and Tyler's and Betty and some of us have talked about this. Some of our conferences, we talk about all of these strange paths that, like your story is amazing. When you talk about I did this and I had a dream and I checked it. And so many people who join us it's a totally different dream in some ways, but isn't it amazing how it all brings us together into kind of a convergence? I think it's amazing.
Yeah. And then I started listening to Jono's channel and found you on there and then started following United Israel. But the one thing in my dream that I didn't pay attention to that I should have paid attention to was that and I didn't even notice this really, is when I was moving on, my husband wasn't with me. And I didn't really even think about it.
Yeah.
But I was telling a dream to my dad one time, and my husband was there, and he looked at me, he says, well, am I in the dream? And I said, I thought about it for a second. I said, no, you're not there. And he was like, had his feelings hurt.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh. I said, but you've been in lots of my other dreams. He's
right.
like, oh, make him feel better. But, and that happened. I had to move on with my kids and no husband.
Yeah.
Because he passed away.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, I was like, well, I knew this was going to happen. Why didn't I pay attention? Why didn't I take a, life insurance policy out on him? But anywho, yeah, practical person.
Yeah, I got you. Well, like I said, I'm very glad that you found us, and it's, I mean, now, and the good thing about this is we have so many people in different places, but at the same time, we're all interested in truly seeking out what do these texts tell us, and so I'm glad that you're with us.
Thank you. And the funny thing is, in my purse, when God said, you have the key, you've always had it, or the voice, I had just put in my big brown bag that was in my dream a JPS to knock.
Okay.
that I had found that was my grandfather's.
Yeah.
I had just put that in my purse. And I think that's what he meant is like, it's in there. It's in your purse. Just, it was literal. Just dig it out and start reading that.
Just grab it.
And, I did actually start reading that shortly after.
Wonderful. Wonderful stuff, Karen. The
But I'm not going to
hinge.
build a standing stone henge around that room where I had that dream,
Yeah. Yep. Well, good stuff. Well, let's keep thinking about these hinges, as you call it, and see what other people might have to say. But stick around, because you're always bringing in things. Especially, I know you study a lot on the ancient Near East, so stick around, because I'm sure you'll be able to jump back in the discussion. We're going to go for a little while today. So,
Okay, sounds good.
all right, my friend.
Okay,
Betty Elisheva. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you. We're ready.
You were trying to unmute me as I was trying to unmute myself.
I got it. We're ready. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Shabbat shalom, everybody. I loved your story, Karen. I think that's amazing. I've had some significant dreams as well. I'm not going to go into them right now, but they did change my life. And yet I think we can't dwell on them. And in the text, it says that Jacob, after that awesome experience, it says he lifted up his feet and he went on his way. So after we have such an experience, we can't just stay there and go ooh and ah and whatever. We go on our way and we do what we know that we need to do.
All right, I get you.
I had actually 4 things, small.
Okay.
One is I don't know a lot about gematria, and I'm not even sure that it's really significant, but I think maybe it is.
Okay.
The gematria of Sulam, of ladder, is the same as Sinai. It means Sulam. And I just think that it's 130. Gematria is the numerical value associated to a Hebrew word, and that's what Sulam is.
Yeah.
So as God was at the top of the ladder, or beside, either one. Mm-hmm. He was also at the top of Sinai, or within each person there, and giving instruction. And I think that's significant. Another thing is that, when he identifies himself as the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac, I think it's interesting. And this comes out in our, in my Siddur too, where it says in the beginning of the Amidah that, I'm the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He doesn't say I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He lists each one separately. And I think that is important because we are each important as individuals. Mm-hmm. Even though we're a group, we're lumped together in a group, yet we're each unique. And I think that's a beautiful part of what it is to be a part of a community, that we all have something to contribute.
Yeah.
And another thing that I thought was interesting is that, and I just saw this the other day as I was doing a more careful read, is that in verse 28-22, it says that Jacob took stones, plural. And then you go down and put them under his head. And then when you go to 28:11, all of a sudden it's not stones, it's stone. Do you have anything? I know there's some kind of weird rabbinical stuff on that, that it could be 12 stones, 3, 2, but that Hashem morphed them into one.
Yeah, I didn't look closely at that, but it's interesting you bring that up, Betty. I'm going to go back and look. I wonder if, just a thought, I jotted down the note, but I wonder if it's different sources, or at least according to the scholars. Yeah. I wonder,
Right. Well, that I was hoping that you could look that up and give us some insight. I think it's interesting because I don't think things are written like by an accident or just happenstance. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is the meaning of luz. Somewhere
Yeah.
in the back of my mind, I was thinking that it was attached to like almond.
That's right. That's
You
right.
know, and the almond is the first tree to bloom in Israel. And, there at Luz, Bethel, there were a number of firsts that happened. And I thought that was very interesting. But then there's some other things too. It says that it can also mean, well, now this is the rabbinic thing, which I'm not going to really get into that, but it's the the rabbis say it's a bone at the bottom of the spine that is essential to be like the bone of resurrection. You have to have that or you won't be resurrected.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not gonna.
No, but I've heard that. I've heard that as well.
Right.
Mhm.
But I thought that was interesting that that's called the luz bone. It also says that in Aramaic, the word ladu, which is related to luz, means an asylum or a sanctuary, like a special place, and it can mean a strong city. And so perhaps it was the place of first of idolatry, and then Jacob was renaming it to be a place where Hashem would dwell.
Yeah.
Just some individual little things there. That's really all I had, but I really enjoyed the class today. I just think there's so much here.
Well, I
that we
always
can
enjoy your
learn from.
insights, and you never have to apologize for bringing these points up because I think they're fascinating. And the rabbis have spent a lot of time studying these texts. I mean,
Right.
they're going to find some amazing insights, and I think we would be silly not to
Right.
consider. And sometimes even if we don't take those ideas literally, I don't think they're always meant to be taken literally, but
Right.
there are these associations that they make with the text, and some of them provide a good bit of insight as to what the text actually is
They
talking
do.
about.
And there is one more thing that I forgot, and that has to do with let's see, I wrote it down when Jehovah says that he's at the top of the ladder and he says that he's going to bring Jacob back. I thought, comparing it to Horeb or to Sinai, we also know that the people were prophesied to fall away, but that he would bring them back.
Yeah.
That God would bring them back at the end of the time. And I think that is good for us to remember that there's always a way back. And I just think that's very, very important, that
Yep.
even though we'll be scattered, that we'll all go back to him, be returned to him if our hearts are right.
That's right. Tshuva. I love it.
Yeah, Juba. That's really all.
Good stuff, Betty. Well, hang
Thank
tight.
you.
I'm sure you'll have other insights. We'll be with you for a little while today. So
And now I get to listen to the illustrious Dr. Tabor.
there you go. There he is. That's
Yeah, I
like
made him
it's
smile,
like a
see?
family of scholars
Okay.
right here, lined up. All right, Dr. Tabor.
Okay. I've got to get unmuted. You did that.
I got
Okay,
you.
good. Yeah. So, in a little bit after an initial comment or two, I wanted to share my screen with some ancient drawings of Bethel
Yeah.
or Beijing, if you can enable that. I think it's pretty easy to do. So,
Yeah.
But first, I want to start with a couple of other things. First, in terms of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or even repeating the word Elohim, 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 as Betty mentioned. I think philosophically, from my own reading, particularly of Aristotle, you can reason very close to what is recorded in the book of Acts, chapter 17, where Paul is arguing with Stoics and Epicureans in Athens at Mars Hill, which you can visit, by the way.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing to go there. And if you remember, he essentially argues that there is this force of all forces in whom we live and move and have our being. So that's Aristotle's prime mover. We move and have our being.
Mm-hmm.
As something that's thinking and conscious, let's start at the top with us, can't just emerge unless it is coming from something. And then the second quote in that chapter is, and he is not very far from each one of us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those two quotes are from Paul's mouth, but he's quoting two Greek philosophers, Erastus, I believe, and Epimenides. So I mentioned that to point out that this is reasoning. And I believe it might have been Pascal, I can't remember, the French philosopher. It might not have been him, but he said it's one thing to believe in God, the Elohim of Elohim. It's another thing not to name that God. Elohim can be the name, as Ross said. It's not necessarily a title.
Yeah.
But to also say, specifically, tell me more about that one in whom we live and move and have our being, and he's not very far from each one of us. There you have stories, okay? And they can be universal. They don't have to be Hebrew stories. All over the world, throughout history, people have cried out for help and cried out for understanding and revelation, and countless stories of people taking various paths. So I thought of this because of Karen's comment and putting it together, the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. So if you remember, Yeshua's asked once, well, how would you prove resurrection from the Torah?
Right.
Because it's just not there anywhere. You'd be just speculating. And so, first of all, he makes a declaration that in the end, those who are worthy to attain the resurrection, will live in a new kind of existence. But then he says, as far as the Torah goes, because he's talking to a Sadducee who's trying to trip him up, he says, God says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, not I was.
Right.
Therefore, quote, I'm going to quote it, all live to him. Okay. Notice how similar that is. In him we live and have our being. So whether you're living and dead, remember that old song, he's got the whole world in his hands. So it's not a matter, do you go to heaven or do you do this or do you do that? It's not geographic. It's a state of being. And you have two traits. One is you're dead. You're sleep. It's a metaphor of sleep. And the other is you're in the presence of God, especially if God wants your presence.
Mm-hmm.
If he doesn't, that's another subject.
Right.
So all live to him. Now that's interesting. And you say, why you quote? Is this like a Christian group or Tabor here? He's quoting Yeshua. Well, that's what I work on, first of all. But guess what? Rabbinic scholars, texts, also use that same argument. So it's, who said it first? I don't know. Either Yeshua said it and later rabbis said, well, that's a good comment to make about that. But they also argue with Sadducees and use that same argument. I can get you the reference. I don't have it handy right now. But it's it's either, I think it's in a Talmudic passage, but based on the Mishnah. So what does that mean? It means that beyond the Elohim of Elohims that every one of you feels right now. I don't care who you can be an abject atheist. There's nothing but atoms in the void. And you still are feeling the power, the very fact that you're saying that you're thinking, that you're deliberating is the force. You can't deny the force or you would deny your own being. And even if you're dead, I think your being remains. So, what is the point of the story then? When you say I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you're not describing traits or attributes. That's at Sinai. Remember? God has a self-identity. I think it's mentioned, how many is it, Ross? 11 times in the Tanakh. Merciful and gracious,
Yeah.
abounding in steadfast love, and so forth. No, what you're doing is telling a story. Oh, he called Abraham, Genesis 12. He chose Isaac. He spoke to Jacob. You see what you're doing? Now you're doing what Karen did. You're narrating the God the power. You don't have to say God, the force. But the force is as personal as you are. The force from which you arise cannot be impersonal because you're personal.
Mm-hmm.
That's logic. Like a rock doesn't have it. You didn't come from a rock, but we have physical bodies, of course. So I think if it was Pascal, I love adding, I believe in a great, awesome power that is every bit as personal as us, who knows us intimately, every hair on our head. And I can tell you narrative then about that God. So see, when you say that, what you've done is give it a historical context. Remember the Germans, Ross, they call it Heilsgeschichte,
Mm-hmm.
right? Heilsgeschichte sounds almost like a Nazi cry.
Yeah.
You know, Heil. Heil is salvation, healing, and so forth. When you say Heil, you're wishing somebody well. What an abomination to put Hitler's name with it. You know, and people think it just means hail, but it means hail, like we say hail in English for health, right? The old English. Are you healthy and hail? Anybody ever heard that? I don't think anybody says it today, but I've heard it.
Yeah.
Eric's nodding his head. So the idea of a story and a narration that then you would say, oh, and he did this, he did this, and he did this. And in our organization, there are two pillars, and I'll get to pillars in a minute. There are two pillars of the faith. One is the call of Abraham, the other is Mount Horeb. That's it. Okay. As someone once said, I think you know who, the rest is commentary.
Mm-hmm.
Was that Hillel or Jesus? Both. Both, right? They both said it. They were very similar thinkers. So think about it. So what do we say? Proclaiming the Decalogue faith to all nations. That's United Israel. That's what you should tell people. Say, what is this thing? Is it Jewish? It's an organization founded by a Jewish man, David Horowitz, in 1944, to proclaim the essential Decalogue biblical faith to anybody and everybody that would listen. It's not a church, it's not this, it's not that. It's a tent. And to get you could actually stand outside the tent. Some of you are standing outside. That's fine. You don't have to come in. But if you want to just peek your head in, you can do that, and you will get the welcome. Come on in. Come on in. You say, well, wait, I'm a devout Christian. I take the communion. I'm not sure you guys do all that. That's not our organization, but come on in. Not to convince you otherwise, but we're interested in questers. So I'm writing some memoirs finally. But just here a story, there a story. If you ever want to write memoirs at my age, you can't just sit out. Okay, I'm going to write my memoirs now. You'll remember some things, but what I've started doing about a year ago, it's just I have it on the top of my computer, a little file. And you just open a Word document or any text and you just type it like first memory, age 3, da, 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 da. You just give the narration, then you date it.
Yeah.
So gradually you get things. But the title of this, and don't steal it, is So Strange My Past. Now, I am stealing it from Abraham Carmichael, who wrote a book about going from a Roman Catholic priest to a Reformed Jew to a conservative Jew. Oh, first B'nai Noach to a Reformed Jew to a conservative Jew to an Orthodox Jew. So Strange My Past. But it's out of print, so now I can use it. I can use that title.
Yeah.
But that's the title for all of you, too. I guarantee you. I guarantee you. That's our title. That's the title of this organization, is Paz. It's Ancient Paz. Search for the Ancient Past, So Strange My Past. Now, if you'll come to the meeting in April, we will sit up as late as you want. Really. Ross will give me some caffeine or some kind of drug to keep me awake. And we'll stay up and we'll tell stories because boy, do we have stories. And I probably know the most of them about others in the group. Ross probably knows just about as many as I do and also knows others that I don't know. But I'm talking about why did Patty Tyler come to us? Because her birth name is Tabor and she saw me on television one day and said, "Oh, there's a professor named Tabor. He would probably know what Tabor is or like who am I, right?" And she calls me up, and I was glad to tell her, but she's making a genealogical call, right? And then I said, "Well, Patty, tell me about yourself. What are you?" Said, "Well, I won't do Patty, but you know how sweet. We're my husband Dave and I. We follow the Torah and keep the Sabbath, and we quit eating pork." And I go, "No." Now she didn't know anything about my views. She never heard of me. She just saw me on a History Channel thing or something. Okay, story. You get it?
Yep.
All of you have these stories. Timothy, I could go on. Timothy Thompson, oh my goodness, what a story. John Hulley, on and on and on. Now, this isn't a glass moving around the room or any, ooh kind of thing, but dreams are the way the prophets say, and Deuteronomy as well says, Joel 2, is a way of communicating. You don't have to do magic tricks and spirits that peep and mutter. Remember when Isaiah makes fun of those? He said, "Should not a people seek their Elohim, their God, right? And to go to the law and the testimony if you want to seek Elohim." So I wanted to say all of that. So come to our meeting. I hope if we can't get you all in, we'll set up a tent. Ross, do something. We have enough time to plan. We will accommodate
Well,
everybody.
plans are about to begin in earnest, as we say. We're going to be really working on that. I know we're running a little bit behind, but we've had a busy year,
you're
so
okay.
but
You're okay.
we're about to put some things out on this.
Yeah. So you guys all come, and I promise you won't regret it. Plus lectures and Bible studies and all the other stuff. And Doug, you got to come. I'm looking at Doug. He's got his hand up. Doug, I just missed him in San Diego because it was Thanksgiving holidays and we didn't have time to set something up, but we got to get to Louisiana. Now, if is it possible for me to share my
let's see if it's work. I think I have it set right. Go ahead.
You can send request. Okay, I sent the request. You should have gotten that.
Let's see.
Multiple presenters. Yep, I'm good. Okay. Okay, the first thing I want to show you is a picture. And let me just center it up here. On my screen, that's centered. Hold on. I want to make it big for you. Because this was one of the great surprises of my life. Is that really big? Pretty big?
That's good, yeah.
Yeah, okay. This is an aerial drone shot of the excavations at Suba, which is 17 miles west of Jerusalem by Ein Kerem. Ein Kerem's where John the Baptist was born. And when we dug this from, oh boy, I can't remember the years, but for about 8 years before he went to Jerusalem, because Doug's dug with us at Jerusalem. And some of you might have been to Suba, I don't remember.
I've been there, but I didn't dig.
You've been there, and the Tylers dug with us for sure. So anyway, you got to picture this right here. Let me tell you about this, and then I'll get to these pillars. That's where I'm leading up, because this is one of the best examples in Israel. So when we started digging, the tree line was across here. All this was filled in. It looked just like this. Okay. So all of this looked just like that. So if you could Photoshop it back, now we cut the brush and all that where we could expose an area. This was not visible. See these stairs? I remember the day we found the top stair right here, and I could see it was a stair. And then the second one, can you imagine? And then a third one. And you go like, we're going down in a stairway. And at the top, there was an opening right here where you could peek in this hole right here and crawl across the top. If you want to see all this, go to my blog, jamestabor.com, and just type in Suba, S-U-B-A. Suba means swelling. It's a kibbutz. It's an ancient site. It's mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. And in the time of Hezekiah, Hezekiah built all these reservoirs. So this is actually a gigantic Iron Age reservoir. Now, this right here, when we got to the top, we wanted to catch, there's a huge cave inside here. It runs from the entrance right here, steps down. It's beautiful all the way back. So I don't want to, that's also on YouTube. I have things about Suba. I don't want to go into that. Here's what I want to go into. We wanted to get to the top of the cave, which look how far down it is. So we knew where it was from the entrance, and we started digging right here and taking everything out. And there's the top of the cave. That's how the water comes into the top. And it also, if it floods, it comes in. It's essentially a huge mikvah water reservoir. And this is where we call it the John the Baptist cave, because the earliest inscriptions of John the Baptist, and I think maybe earliest so-called Christian, but I don't think they're Christian, they're Judeo inscriptions of John the Baptist. So you can read all about that. It's amazing to look at. But as we got back here, I'll never forget it. Look at this. We found these 7 stones. I'm not sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, this is 1, 2, 3. I think that's 1, 4, 5, 6, 7. And they were already upright. Like, we did not move them. They're standing stones.
Yeah.
That had finally been covered by rain, erosion. The whole top had been covered. So to see how it was in Hezekiah's time, you'd have to clear all this off, which we didn't need to do. But we were very amazed at that. So right up here, see this channel? That's a spring. Okay. So whether it was, you could say, well, maybe it was Canaanite or whatever. Well, the thing is, these stones were put there when it was dug. We're sure of that. Okay, by the pottery, by everything. Like, we're down at the level of Hezekiah when we dig right here. Okay, that's very interesting. Hezekiah has it done and then puts up 7 standing pillars. 7 of them, exactly 7. Ross mentioned Tamar.
Yeah.
Now, I had never thought, oh, so this is not just a spring and a water source, it's a sacred site as well. And it's actually one of the main water sources for that whole area west of Jerusalem. And if Jesus, for example, is baptizing in Judea in the hill country, which it says he did, Jesus baptized in his group. He's probably baptizing here at Suba because it's a huge reservoir and you can baptize many people. And that's why there's memories of John inside and so forth. It's also where Elizabeth hid from Herod's troops. We have a story about that in one of our legendary accounts. Elizabeth, have you ever thought if Herod is after any messianic kind of figures, and I don't take that story of Matthew literally, but certainly he was opposed to them. So there is a legend or story, apocryphal, but it's 3rd century AD, that Elizabeth found a reservoir with steps going down, and it's on a Byzantine coin, and it is our steps. So it's pretty amazing. So that would help you understand that the pillars, as Karen said, I think, as others have said, are to mark an area. Now, it could be sacred to a Canaanite god. I guess it could be sacred to any god that you believed in. But it very much is a hinge. It's where you're setting up a group of memorial stones. And I don't know, what if Hezekiah's men discovered the spring there and realized it was strong enough, and maybe he said, you got to read this in the book of Kings, how he built these reservoirs, and all of these crops could be irrigated, and it became a prosperous area. It's described in Hezekiah's reign, all the details of it, and we found it. So I'd like to imagine that what this is Tabor imagining. Okay, I don't have proof of this. I'd like to imagine that there was always a spring trickling down into the valley and flooding. But when they found this, they realized, this could feed an entire reservoir, which would then be water for our crops the whole year. And it's going to catch the rain from the mountains. It's right at the bottom of Suba, which is a huge, not huge, but it's pretty tall. It's almost as tall as Mount Tabor, not quite as tall. So maybe he said, well, wait, before you dig, it's cut out of solid bedrock, 90 feet back. Imagine.
Mm.
Let's raise 7 stones and praise, the God of Israel. I can't prove that. No inscriptions, but I think that's what's happening. Now, I have one other thing to share you. When
James, just so you know, I posted
go
the
ahead.
link. I just posted the link to the book Shimon Gibson, The Cave of John the Baptist.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So I
that'll be
posted it
great.
on YouTube as well as the Zoom call here.
Now, when I was in San Diego, one of the purchases I made, let me get rid of that picture, and now I think of another one. There we go. BiblePlaces.com. Check
Yep.
it out if you don't know. This costs a lot. It's a thumb drive. Got a cool little olive wood case. Look, with a little place to put it. I've already put it on my hard drive. I just decided to buy Todd Boland's whole library. Boy, thousands and thousands of pictures, better than I could take. Drone shots of everything, ancient pictures like these. You got to get it, Ross, for the United Israel Library.
Okay.
I'm not going to, you can buy parts of it. I wanted it all. So it was a lot. It was like $400 and something dollars. But, it's going to be amazing. So I started looking at Bethel in Baytoon. And these drawings, I don't know who H.A. Harper is. I could check with Shimon Gibson, who knows all these things off the top of his head, and I will. So, but somebody drew this, and it looks pretty, it's probably about 1830, I would say, just judging, because otherwise you do photography. All those Robinson pictures
Oh,
and
yeah.
so forth come about this period. And it's not color. It's pretty nicely done, though. I really like it.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at that. Now, Ross, you've been to Baytoon and that whole area, and the slides under Bethel have pictures of all that. I'm not going to give you a slideshow. But I thought this was interesting. But then I noticed this, and I looked at another picture that I want you to notice. And it's making me say, Ross, when are we booking the flight to go see this one? I didn't know this. There's a stone circle near Bethel. Now remember, Bethel, Baytoon, there is a hill that people think is Bethel. There is a Jewish settlement there. But there's a stone hill there's a hill with a stone circle. Now I can't tell much from this, but look, this almost looks like something in the middle, like an altar or something.
Mm-hmm.
Ross, does this look familiar to you in any way?
It doesn't, but it doesn't mean that. I mean, Bethel, the place where you pull up to see the spot.
Yeah, it's huge. Right?
But this is something that I would look for, though. I'm wondering if some 19th century explorer said, hey, I think this is the space, in which case we do need to check it out.
Now, what this would mean, picking up on Karen's idea, would be these aren't the stones Jacob set up. See, these stones are to mark a place when people are going here and saying this is the ladder of heaven, so the stairway to heaven, right?
Yeah.
This is so holy. This is sacred ground. Just as Christians later did with their holy sites, and Jews do today with their holy sites.
And like Charles said, that looks like a good place to camp overnight, James.
Yeah, I want my sleeping bag right here, and Ross. I'm going to have Lori here, not you, and then I'll have you over here. You be at my feet somewhere.
Yeah, that's what I'm warming. Make sure you're warm.
Here, camping and guarding for us. You got to sit up all night in case we have any trouble. But this, it looks like somebody's laid a staff down there or something. And that
Maybe a
looks,
scroll.
yeah, and here's a rope. But I'm going to show this to Gibson too, because he'll know right away what that is. He's usually a minimizer though, as
Yeah.
Doug see what he would say. That was put up probably in the 1700s, but no, wait, Shimon. What about the Suba cave? That was under at the Iron Age level. So I just wanted to show you that. I think it's right. Now, if you're a worshiper of a Canaanite god, see, people say, oh, that's pagan. It says to take down all those stones. Yes, if they were dedicated to El,
Yeah.
or one of the Canaanite gods, yes, Marduk or anything, take it down. But if it was dedicated to Elohim or to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, it becomes a sacred spot. So anyway, those are my comments today.
Good stuff.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Hey, thanks for sharing that, James, and
Yeah.
appreciate your time. Now, look, before I bring Damon up, just let me make sure. Sue had your hand up a few moments ago, so if you gave up on us, don't give up. Throw your hand back up. We'll get you in the mix. So there you go. There you go. Damon, yes, sir. Let me unmute you.
So we've been commenting on a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of interesting stuff to comment on. Put some stuff in the chat, but I also have a few other comments to share. One is about this idea of hinges. And I think that, yes, some of this is speculation, but a hinge is not the same as a standing stone, is not the same as a reflecting pool, for instance. There are a lot of different cultic things that were used, and they had subtly different meanings. Hinges typically had to do with astrological orientation and astronomical sightings, because those constellations represented in the pagan mind gods. A reflecting pool was a way to reflect the constellation in the pool and, as it were, bring heaven down to earth, bring the gods down to earth. A standing stone is different. There is similarity, but it specifically has to do with ancestors. Has to do with a progenitor, or possibly more than one progenitor. Like, for instance, Moses erected 12 standing stones at Mount Sinai, representing the 12 tribes of Israel. So you have 12 progenitors there. But I just wanted to bring that out, that typically represents progenitors. Let's see. I'm going to go look at the other thing that I wanted to bring out was the difference between Bethel and Luz, because there actually is one.
1 second,
If you
Damon.
go to Yes?
1 second. I'm just going to say, before you continue, we're going to tell our YouTube audience Shabbat Shalom and let them go about their day. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are a member of the Yachad, please join us in the Zoom call now, and let us know if you need some help doing that. So, but anyway, we are telling our YouTube audience, have a wonderful Shabbat. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.